My name is Camille, and at 34 years old, I thought I knew everything about the man I'd shared my bed with for 12 years. That was until I found an earring under our bed that wasn't mine. It was delicate, expensive gold with a pearl that caught the morning light. My stomach dropped. David and I had built a life together, two beautiful kids, a home filled with laughter. But that tiny piece of jewelry was about to shatter everything. Before I continue with what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more real-life stories like mine. Our life in suburban Denver looked perfect from the outside, and honestly, I believed it was perfect on the inside too. Every morning I'd wake up at 6, get Emma and Luke ready for school, while David made coffee. He'd kiss me goodbye, telling me I was beautiful even in my scrubs before I headed to Children's Hospital, where I worked as a pediatric nurse. David was doing incredibly well as a real estate agent. His charm and confidence that had attracted me in college now helped him close deals on million-dollar homes in Cherry Creek and Washington Park. Sundays were sacred in our house. David would make his famous chocolate chip pancakes while the kids fought over who got to flip them. After breakfast, we'd head to Wash Park, where Emma would practice cartwheels and Luke would insist on playing soccer with his dad. Those afternoon picnics by the lake watching the ducks, while David taught Luke how to skip stones, they felt like scenes from a movie. Evening would find us all piled on the couch arguing about which movie to watch, though David always let the kids win. Just 3 months before I found that earring, we'd celebrated our 12th anniversary at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs. David had surprised me with a suite overlooking the mountains. We'd soaked in the hot tub under the stars, talking about our dreams of buying a vacation cabin in Aspen once the kids were a bit older. He'd held my face in his hands and told me I was more beautiful than the day we met. I actually cried because it felt so genuine, so real. David had this way of making ordinary days special. He'd leave sticky notes in my lunch bag with silly jokes or sweet messages. Sometimes I'd find them in my coat pocket or stuck to my steering wheel. My coworkers were always commenting on the fresh flowers he'd send to the nurses' station just because it was Tuesday, or because he knew I'd had a rough shift the night before. The cards always said the same thing: to my angel who takes care of everyone else's angels. Emma's piano recitals were non-negotiable for David. No matter what showing or closing he had scheduled, he'd be there in the front row recording everything on his phone. He coached Luke's soccer team, even though he barely knew the rules. I'd watch him from the sidelines teaching 8-year-olds about teamwork while secretly letting them win every scrimmage against him. The other moms would tell me how lucky I was, and I'd smile knowing they were absolutely right. My mother adored David. She'd call him before she'd call me, asking his advice about everything from car repairs to investment strategies. "You found yourself a keeper, Cammy," she'd say every single time she visited. "That man worships the ground you walk on." Dad had passed 5 years ago, and David had been the rock who held us all together, handling the funeral arrangements, the estate, everything while I grieved. 3 weeks before finding the earring, David had received a huge promotion. He was now managing partner at his real estate firm, overseeing 20 agents. We'd planned a celebration dinner at Guard and Grace, that fancy steakhouse downtown. He'd ordered champagne and talked excitedly about how this meant we could accelerate our plans. Emma could go to that private arts academy she'd been dreaming about. Luke could join the traveling soccer team. Our college savings accounts were growing steadily, and now they'd grow even faster. We had date night every Thursday. It was sacred time, just us, no kids, no phones, no work talk. Sometimes we'd try new restaurants in Lodo. Sometimes we'd just walk around the Botanic Gardens holding hands like teenagers. David would still open every door for me, pull out my chair, order the wine he knew I loved. We'd talk about everything and nothing, laughing at inside jokes from our 15-year history together. Our friends called us couple goals. At barbecues and dinner parties, they'd ask for our secret. David would always pull me close and say, "I just never stopped dating her." I'd roll my eyes at his cheesiness, but my heart would flutter every single time. We were that couple who still held hands at the grocery store, who kissed goodbye every morning, who said "I love you" before hanging up every phone call. The future seemed so clear, so bright. We'd mapped it all out together on lazy Sunday mornings. Once the kids were in college, we'd travel. Italy first because I'd always dreamed of seeing the Sistine Chapel. Then Japan because David was obsessed with their architecture. We'd downsize the house eventually, maybe get that condo in downtown Denver we'd looked at before having kids. Grow old together, become those adorable elderly couples you see at restaurants still laughing at each other's jokes after 50 years. Looking back now, I realize happiness had made me blind. When you trust someone completely, when you believe in the life you've built together, you don't look for cracks in the foundation. You don't question the stability of walls that have sheltered you for over a decade. That morning, making our bed, humming along to the radio, I had no idea I was about to discover that our perfect life was built on quicksand. The changes started so gradually that I didn't even register them as changes at first. David had always worked hard, but over the past 3 months his late showings seemed to multiply. "The market's hot, baby," he'd say, loosening his tie as he walked through the door at 9, sometimes 10 at night. "These clients want to see houses after their own work hours." It made sense. The Denver real estate market was absolutely insane, with houses selling for $50,000 over asking price within hours of listing. Then there was the cologne. David had worn the same scent since college, a woodsy Ralph Lauren fragrance I'd bought him for our first Christmas together. But one night as he leaned over to kiss me goodnight, I smelled something different. Sharper, more expensive, unfamiliar. "Oh, a client gave it to me," he explained when I asked. "Some fancy Tom Ford thing. Thought I'd try it out." The bottle appeared in our bathroom, but I never saw him actually apply it. His laptop, which had always sat open on the kitchen counter like a family bulletin board, suddenly required a password. We'd always shared everything. I knew his ATM PIN, he knew my email password. But one morning, when I needed to quickly check the weather, I found myself locked out. "IT department required it," he said casually when I mentioned it. "New security protocols for client information." Again, it sounded reasonable. Real estate deals involved sensitive financial information. The phone calls were harder to explain away. His cell would ring during dinner, and instead of silencing it like he always had, he'd glance at the screen and excuse himself. I'd watch through the window as he paced around the garage, gesticulating with his free hand, sometimes laughing, sometimes serious. "New client," he'd say when he returned. "Very demanding. Sorry, honey, but these clients never seemed to have names, never seemed to result in sales he celebrated." Our credit card statements started showing charges that puzzled me. Lunches at Fruition, that intimate restaurant in Capitol Hill I'd been dying to try. "Client meeting," David said when I asked. "A $300 charge at Nordstrom." "Client gift," he explained, though I'd never known him to buy client gifts before. "Cash withdrawals of $500, $600 at a time." "Open house expenses," he claimed, though open houses had never required cash before. His defensiveness was new and sharp. Simple questions like, "How was your day?" would earn irritated sighs. "Why the interrogation, Camille? I'm tired." When I'd suggest weekend family activities, he'd snap about needing time to himself about the pressure he was under at work. This from the man who used to plan elaborate Saturday adventures for us, who claimed Sunday family time was his recharge for the week ahead. The missed date nights started 6 weeks ago. First, it was an emergency showing for a cash buyer. Then a contract negotiation that couldn't wait. Then a networking event he'd forgotten to mention. "We'll make it up next week," he'd promise, but next week would bring another excuse, another apology that felt increasingly hollow. I found a receipt in his jacket pocket while doing laundry. Tiffany & Company, $2,300. My birthday had passed 2 months ago. Christmas was still 3 months away, and our anniversary had already happened. When I checked our jewelry box, there was nothing new. Maybe it was a client gift, I told myself, though what client receives Tiffany jewelry? His phone, which used to lie carelessly around the house, was now permanently attached to him. He'd take it to the bathroom, place it face down during meals, sleep with it under his pillow. When texts came in, he'd angle the screen away from me to read them. If I walked into a room while he was typing, he'd quickly switch apps, pretending to check the weather or sports scores. David had never been particularly interested in fitness beyond our weekend bike rides, but suddenly he had a gym membership at that expensive place in Cherry Creek. New workout clothes appeared in his drawer, protein shakes in the refrigerator. He'd leave at 5:30 in the morning, claiming the gym was less crowded then. His body did look better, leaner, more defined. "Just want to stay healthy for you and the kids," he said when I complimented his new abs. The ATM withdrawals were becoming more frequent. 400 here, 300 there, always from our joint account. When I asked about it, he got defensive. "Do I need to ask permission to access our money? I'm the one earning most of it anyway." That stung. We'd always been a team, never keeping score about who contributed what. His income was higher, yes, but I'd supported us through his lean years when he was building his client base. Emma, sweet, observant. Emma was the first to really voice what I'd been trying to ignore. "Mom, why doesn't Dad laugh at your jokes anymore?" she asked one night as I tucked her in. "And why does he always seem mad?" I made excuses about work stress, about adult responsibilities, but her words haunted me as I lay awake that night listening to David typing on his phone in the darkness beside me. The weekends brought new mysteries. Golf trips with clients whose names he could never quite remember. Saturday showings that stretched from morning until late afternoon. Sunday open houses for listings that didn't appear on his company's website. He'd come home exhausted, shower immediately, and fall asleep on the couch before dinner. The man who used to treasure our family weekends now seemed desperate to escape them. His laptop was constantly with him now, even brought into our bedroom at night. When I'd walk in, he'd quickly close whatever he was looking at, offering bright smiles that didn't reach his eyes. "Just work stuff, boring spreadsheets," he'd say. But spreadsheets don't usually make someone's face flush, don't usually require such quick concealment. The emotional distance was perhaps the most painful change. We'd always talked about everything from silly observations about our neighbors to deep fears about raising teenagers in today's world. Now conversations felt forced, like we were strangers making small talk. He'd forgotten the plot of the TV show we'd been watching together for 3 years. He couldn't remember the name of my new colleague I'd mentioned dozens of times. It was like he was physically present but mentally somewhere else entirely, and I had no idea where that somewhere was. That earring changed everything. Such a small thing, really no bigger than a dime, but it might as well have been a grenade. After David left for work that morning, I sat on our bed holding it up to the light, my hands trembling. It was clearly expensive, the kind of jewelry I'd admire in store windows, but never buy for myself. The pearl was real, I could tell by its weight and irregular surface. This wasn't some costume piece that could be explained away. I called in sick to work something I'd only done twice in 8 years. My supervisor, Janet, heard something in my voice. "Everything okay, honey?" she asked. I mumbled something about a stomach bug and hung up before I started crying. Then I did something I'd never done before in our entire marriage. I decided to investigate my husband. The phone records were my first stop. David had switched us to paperless billing years ago, but I knew his password. At least I thought I did. After 3 failed attempts, I called the phone company, directly verifying my identity as the co-account holder. 20 minutes later, I was staring at 6 months of call logs on my laptop screen. One number appeared over and over again. Sometimes multiple calls in a single day, some lasting over 2 hours. Late-night calls at 1, 2 in the morning when David was supposedly asleep beside me. Weekend calls during his golf trips and client showings. The area code was local Denver area. My fingers shook as I typed the number into Google. Monica Hayes. The name appeared linked to a LinkedIn profile. I clicked, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made other women feel instantly inadequate. Long auburn hair, green eyes, perfect smile showing perfect teeth. Her profile said she worked as a closing coordinator at Premier Title Company. I recognized the name immediately. David's firm used them for all their closings. Her Facebook profile wasn't private. The latest post from just 2 days ago showed her at a wine bar I recognized in Lodo. She was holding up a glass of champagne, laughing. The caption read, Celebrating big changes coming soon, sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them. The comments were full of heart emojis and congratulations, though for what wasn't clear. I scrolled through her photos like a detective examining crime scene evidence. There 3 weeks back, a picture from a Colorado Rockies game. The angle was careful, but I could see a man's hand on the seat beside her, wearing a watch I'd given David for our 10th anniversary. Another photo from a month ago showed her at a restaurant in Aspen the same weekend David had his mandatory company retreat. My friend Jessica worked at a marketing firm downtown. I called her trying to keep my voice casual. "Hey Jess, random question. You mentioned seeing David at that wine bar on Larimer a few weeks ago." There was a pause. "Yeah, actually, I've seen him there a couple of times. I figured you guys were regulars there now." My stomach churned. "We've never been there together." The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably. "Oh, Camille, I'm so sorry. I assumed you knew." The next 3 days I became someone I didn't recognize. I checked David's office parking lot during lunch. 3 times his car wasn't there when his secretary assured me he was in meetings. I drove by the title company where Monica worked, seeing his BMW parked outside for 2 hours when he was supposedly showing houses in Highlands Ranch, completely opposite direction. The second phone discovery happened by accident. I was looking for phone charger in his car when I decided to check the glove compartment. There behind the registration papers was another iPhone. It was turned off, but when I powered it on, no password was required. The only app was messaging, and there was only one conversation thread. The contact was saved as just M. The messages made me physically ill. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Last night was incredible. She doesn't appreciate what she has. Just 6 more months and we can stop hiding. You make me feel alive again. The baby is going to be so lucky to have you as a daddy." Baby. The word hit me like a physical blow. I actually ran to the bathroom and threw up, then sat on the cold tile floor sobbing until I couldn't breathe. There were photos too. Selfies of them together, her head on his shoulder, both smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. Pictures from restaurants, from hiking trails we'd planned to explore as a family, from hotel rooms that made my chest feel like it was being crushed. The credit card statement I'd questioned made sense now. I dug deeper into our finances, something I'd stupidly left mostly to David since he was the financial expert. There was a card I didn't know about, statements going to his office address. Thousands of dollars in charges. Jewelry, restaurants, hotels, lingerie from Victoria's Secret, prenatal vitamins from CVS, a deposit at an apartment complex in Capitol Hill. Our savings account, the one we'd been building for the kids' college funds, was missing $30,000. Transferred out over the past 4 months in increments small enough not to trigger the alerts we'd set up. The money had gone to an account I didn't recognize. When I called the bank, they confirmed it was David's individual account opened 6 months ago. I found myself parked outside the apartment complex from the credit card statement. It was the kind of place young professionals lived, with a rooftop pool and gym completely different from our family-friendly suburban neighborhood. I sat there for hours watching people come and go, wondering which unit was hers, wondering how many times my husband had walked through those doors. The private investigator was Jessica's idea. "You need real evidence if you're going to confront him," she said. I felt dirty hiring someone to follow my own husband, but I was past the point of caring about moral high ground. The PI, a woman named Karen, who looked like someone's grandmother, was brutally efficient. "Honey, I see this every day. You want proof, I'll get you proof." She did. Within a week, she had photos that destroyed any possibility of innocent explanation. David and Monica entering hotels together, kissing in his car, shopping for furniture at West Elm, her very visible baby bump as they walked hand in hand through Cherry Creek Mall. The same mall where we'd bought Emma's back-to-school clothes just weeks earlier. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. David's father called me one afternoon. "Camille, honey, I need to ask you something strange. Did you and David buy an investment property? He asked to borrow $50,000 for a down payment. Said you two were getting into real estate investing." My laugh was bitter. "No, we didn't buy anything." The silence on the other end was heavy with disappointment. I was afraid of that. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. That night I sat at our kitchen table, evidence spread out like a map of betrayal. 12 years of marriage reduced to phone records and credit card statements. 2 children upstairs doing homework, blissfully unaware that their world was about to shatter. David walked in at 8:30, complaining about traffic, asking what was for dinner. I looked at this man I'd loved since I was 22, father of my children, my supposed partner for life, and felt absolutely nothing but cold, calculating rage. I decided to follow him that Thursday evening. He'd texted that he had a showing in Wash Park, probably wouldn't be home until late. I arranged for my mother to pick up the kids, telling her I had to work an emergency shift. Then I waited in my car outside his office, baseball cap pulled low, feeling like a character in a bad movie. David emerged at 5:45, checking his phone and smiling at something on the screen. He got into his BMW and I followed 3 cars behind, my heart pounding with each turn. He wasn't heading toward Wash Park. Instead, he drove to Capitol Hill, to that apartment complex I'd been staking out. I watched him pull into the parking garage, then found street parking where I could see the entrance. 20 minutes later, he emerged from the main doors with flowers and a bottle of wine. Roses, red ones, the kind he used to bring me on special occasions. The wine looked expensive, probably that Silver Oak Cabernet he only bought for anniversaries. He was wearing the cologne I didn't recognize, and he'd changed from his work clothes into the jeans I'd bought him last Christmas, the ones that made him look 10 years younger. I sat in my car for 2 hours, watching the sun set over the mountains, watching lights turn on in various apartments, trying to guess which one was hers. My phone buzzed with texts from the kids asking when I'd be home. I told them to be good for Grandma, that I'd see them in the morning. The lying was becoming easier, a skill I'd apparently learned from my husband. At 8:20, the main door opened. David walked out with her, Monica, and the sight of them together knocked the wind out of me. She was even more beautiful in person, wearing a flowing dress that showed off her pregnancy. David's hand rested protectively on her lower back, the same way he'd guided me when I was pregnant with our children. They stopped at the bottom of the steps, and he pulled her close, kissing her deeply, passionately, the way he hadn't kissed me in months. I was out of my car before I consciously decided to move. David, my voice carried across the parking lot, steady and cold. They jumped apart like teenagers caught by parents. The look on David's face cycled through surprise, anger, and finally resignation. Monica's hand went instinctively to her belly, protective of the child that represented the destruction of my family. Camille, he said my name like it was an accusation. What are you doing here? The audacity of the question almost made me laugh. I could ask you the same thing, but I think it's pretty obvious. Monica started to back away, but I held up my hand. No, please stay. You're part of this conversation whether you like it or not. David's initial response was denial. This isn't what it looks like. I actually did laugh then, bitter and sharp. Really? Because it looks like you're having an affair with a pregnant woman while your wife and kids are at home waiting for you. His face flushed red. You followed me. You've been spying on me. That's sick, Camille. That's stalking. The attempt to make me the villain ignited my rage. Don't you dare try to turn this around. 6 months, David. I know about the phone, the money, the apartment, all of it. Monica gasped, turning to David. You said you were separated, that the divorce was almost final. I looked at her with something almost like pity. We just celebrated our anniversary 3 months ago. We made love that night. Were you separated then? David's mask finally slipped completely. Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I'm with Monica. Yes, she's pregnant with my child. And yes, I'm leaving you. Each word was a dagger, but I stood my ground, refusing to cry, refusing to give him that satisfaction. I've been trying to find the right time to tell you, but there's never a good time for something like this. How considerate of you, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. And the $30,000 you stole from our children's college funds, were you waiting for the right time to mention that too? His face paled. That's not stealing. Half of that money is mine. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone to show him screenshots. According to these bank records, you transferred it without my knowledge to your private account. That's theft and fraud. The truth poured out like poison. They'd met at a closing 8 months ago. She made him feel young, alive, excited about the future. I'd become boring, too focused on the kids, had let myself go after having children. Look at her, he gestured to Monica. She takes care of herself. She's interested in my work. She doesn't nag me about family dinners and soccer practices. Each accusation was meant to hurt, and they did. But they also revealed how pathetic he'd become. You're right, I said, surprising them both. I did focus on our children. I did prioritize our family. I thought that's what partners did. I thought that's what you wanted too. Monica was crying now, mascara running down her perfect cheeks. I didn't know, she kept saying. He told me you were getting divorced. He said you hadn't been intimate in years. I looked at David with disgust. We had sex 2 weeks ago. Remember, after the school fundraiser, you told me I looked beautiful in that black dress. His jaw clenched, caught in another lie. Monica made a sound like she'd been punched, stepping away from him. You said you hadn't touched her in a year. You said you slept in the guest room. The unraveling was almost satisfying to watch. David tried to reach for Monica, but she pulled away. Don't touch me. God, I'm such an idiot. She looked at me with tears streaming. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He told me. I believed him. I felt an unexpected moment of solidarity with this woman who'd helped destroy my marriage. We'd both been deceived by the same man. David's tone shifted to pleading. Camille, let's go home and talk about this rationally. We can work something out. Think about the kids. The manipulation was so transparent it was insulting. Oh, now you want to think about the kids. Where was that concern when you were playing house with your mistress? Monica flinched at the word but didn't dispute it. I want you out of the house tonight, I told him, surprised by how calm I sounded. Pack a bag and leave. You can stay with Monica or your parents or sleep in your car. I don't care, but you're not spending another night under my roof. He started to protest about his rights, about it being his house too. Would you prefer I call the police about the financial fraud? Or maybe your clients would like to know how you've been spending your time during those showings. The threat worked. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Can I at least say goodbye to the kids? The request made me want to scream. You should have thought about that before you decided to blow up their lives. You can see them this weekend supervised, after I've had time to figure out how to explain that their father chose his mistress and her baby over them. Monica interjected weakly. I didn't know there were children. You said you never wanted kids. Another lie exposed. David had been constructing entirely different realities for each of us, and now they were colliding spectacularly. I almost felt sorry for Monica, young and pregnant with a liar's child, but my sympathy had limits. As I walked back to my car, David called out, This doesn't have to be ugly, Camille. We can be adults about this. I turned back, meeting his eyes one last time. It's already ugly, David. You made it ugly the moment you decided our family wasn't enough for you. And as for being adults, adults don't lie, cheat, and steal from their children's future. Adults face consequences for their actions. Get ready to face yours. I drove home, shaking, adrenaline finally wearing off. But underneath the pain and rage, something else was stirring. Relief. The uncertainty was over. The gaslighting, the doubt, the constant questioning of my own instincts, all of it was done. The truth, as brutal as it was, had set something free in me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was a woman who'd been betrayed, and now I was a woman with a plan. The next 72 hours were a blur of calculated action. While David packed his things that night, looking pathetic and defeated, I sat in Emma's room holding her favorite stuffed animal and making phone calls. First to Rachel, my best friend since nursing school, who'd become a successful divorce attorney. I'm coming over right now, she said when I told her. And Camille, we're going to destroy him legally. Trust me. Rachel arrived with her laptop, a box of tissues I didn't need, and a bottle of wine I definitely did. We sat at my kitchen table until 3 a.m, documenting everything. She had me forward all the evidence to her secured email. Financial fraud, adultery with evidence theft from marital assets. We've got him dead to rights, she said with the kind of grim satisfaction only a divorce lawyer could muster. Colorado's an equitable distribution state, but judges don't look kindly on spouses who steal and cheat. The next morning, after getting the kids to school with promises that Daddy was just busy with work, I met with a forensic accountant Rachel recommended. Marcus was a small, neat man who looked like he should be teaching calculus, but Rachel said he was a bloodhound with financial records. Within 4 hours, he'd uncovered things that made my stomach turn. David hadn't just taken $30,000. He'd opened 3 credit cards in my name, maxing them out to fund his new life. He'd been slowly transferring money from our investment accounts, liquidating bonds we'd bought for the kids' education. There's more, Marcus said, adjusting his glasses. He's been hiding commissions. Based on his firm's public records and his reported income, there's about $70,000 unaccounted for over the past 6 months. He showed me spreadsheets that might as well have been in ancient Greek, but the bottom line was clear. David had been planning his exit for months, maybe longer, systematically stripping our assets while maintaining the facade of our perfect life. I drove to David's father's house that afternoon. Robert Sr. was a retired judge, stern but fair, who'd always treated me like the daughter he never had. When I showed him the evidence, his face went through several shades of red before settling on a grayish pallor that worried me. "That boy," he said quietly, and somehow the disappointment in those 2 words was worse than any screaming could have been. "Camille, I'll testify if you need me to. What he's done to you, to those children, it's unconscionable." David's mother, Patricia, cried when Robert told her. She held my hands across their kitchen table, the same table where we'd celebrated countless holidays. "We'll still be Emma and Luke's grandparents," she said fiercely. "Nothing changes that. And you'll always be our daughter, divorce or no divorce." She wrote me a check for $20,000 on the spot. "For the kids' college funds," she said when I protested, "to start replacing what our son stole." The custody emergency hearing was scheduled for the following week. Rachel had pulled strings, calling in favors. "We need to establish temporary orders before he tries anything stupid," she explained. I provided evidence of David's erratic behavior, the financial crimes, the affair that demonstrated poor judgment. 12 nurses from my unit wrote character witness letters. My supervisor documented my exemplary work record, my reliability, my dedication. Even Mrs. Patterson from next door, who'd watched David coming and going at odd hours, provided a statement. I discovered David had been using our home for his affair when I was at work. The neighbor's security camera, which they kindly shared, showed Monica arriving multiple times when the kids were at school and I was at the hospital. In Emma's room, in Luke's room, in the bed where our children were conceived. The violation felt so profound I had to replace all our bedding, couldn't stand the thought of sleeping on sheets they might have touched. Through another twist of fate, or perhaps karma, I discovered Monica was married. Her Facebook relationship status said single, but a deeper dive revealed a husband, Thomas, who worked as a pilot and was frequently away. A reverse image search of their wedding photos led me to his contact information. The conversation was brutal but necessary. "I thought you should know," I told him, hearing his world shatter through the phone just as mine had. "Thank you," he said finally. "I suspected something, but thank you." David's real estate license came under scrutiny when an anonymous tip reached the state licensing board about potential ethics violations. The tip detailed how he'd been using client time for personal activities, falsifying showing reports, and possibly commingling client funds with personal accounts. I couldn't prove I wasn't the anonymous tipster, but then again, I didn't try very hard to deny it either. His clients started pulling out one by one. Mrs. Chen, who'd been working with him to sell her luxury condo, fired him after hearing about the financial fraud. The Johnsons' first-time homebuyers he'd been stringing along for months found a new agent. Word traveled fast in Denver's real estate community. David's reputation, built over 8 years, crumbled in 8 days. His firm placed him on administrative leave pending investigation. Monica left him when the money ran out. I heard through the gossip network that she'd moved back with her parents in Fort Collins after her husband filed for divorce. The apartment David had been paying for was abandoned, the lease broken. She'd realized too late that David's promises were as empty as his marriage vows. The baby she carried would have a father who'd destroyed 2 families for a fantasy that lasted less than a year. I hired movers while David was at his disciplinary hearing with the real estate board. They packed his things efficiently, storing them in a unit I'd paid for 1 month. After that, it would be his problem. I changed the locks, installed a security system, and felt safer than I had in months. Emma asked why we needed new locks. "Just updating things, sweetheart," I said, hating the necessity of lies to protect her innocence a little longer. The forensic accountant found more hidden assets. A boat David had bought and registered under his business name stored at Chatfield Reservoir. A stake in a vacation rental property in Breckenridge he'd invested in with money that should have gone to our retirement accounts. Cryptocurrency accounts, holding another $15,000. Each discovery was another nail in the coffin of any potential reconciliation, not that I wanted one. Rachel filed the divorce papers with a comprehensive list of David's transgressions: financial fraud, adultery, theft, breach of fiduciary duty, intentional infliction of emotional distress. "We're going scorched earth," she told me with a smile that would have frightened me if she weren't on my side. "By the time we're done, he'll be lucky if he can afford a studio apartment in Aurora." My support system rallied in ways that still make me emotional. The nurses at work created a meal train bringing dinners so I didn't have to cook, while managing the legal tsunami. Emma's piano teacher offered free lessons until things settled. Luke's soccer coach made sure he got to every practice, never letting him feel forgotten in the chaos. My mother moved in temporarily, providing stability for the kids, while I attended depositions and court hearings. David tried to contact me repeatedly, cycling through different approaches. Anger. "You're destroying my career out of spite." Self-pity. "I made a mistake, but this punishment doesn't fit the crime." Bargaining. "We can work this out without lawyers, save money for the kids." Fake concern. "I'm worried about your mental state. This vindictiveness isn't like you." I didn't respond to any of it, letting Rachel handle all communication. The man who'd shared my bed for 12 years had become a stranger whose words held no weight. The court date arrived faster than expected. David showed up looking haggard, wearing a suit that seemed too big, probably because he'd lost weight. Monica wasn't there, but her absence spoke volumes. His lawyer was competent but overwhelmed by the evidence Rachel had compiled. Financial records, photos, witness statements, character references. It all painted a picture of a man who'd systematically betrayed his family while planning his escape. When the judge asked David to explain the missing money, his stammering response was painful to watch. When questioned about the credit cards in my name, he claimed I must have forgotten authorizing them. When confronted with the evidence of him bringing Monica to our home, he actually tried to claim it was for legitimate business purposes. Each lie made his situation worse, and his lawyer's face grew increasingly grim. The ruling was everything Rachel had promised. Primary custody to me with supervised visitation for David until he completed a parenting class. The house awarded to me and the children. David ordered to pay 60% of his income in child support and alimony. All hidden assets to be liquidated and divided, with 70% going to me to compensate for the theft. His real estate license had been revoked the week before, so his income was already decimated, but the judge was unsympathetic to his reduced circumstances. "Mr. Morrison," the judge said at the end, looking at David over her glasses, "in my 20 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such calculated deception and financial manipulation within a marriage. You've not only betrayed your wife's trust, but potentially compromised your children's future for your own selfish desires. The court's decision reflects the severity of your actions." David's face crumpled, finally understanding that actions have consequences, that you can't destroy a family and walk away unscathed. As we left the courthouse, David tried one more time to speak to me. "Camille, please. You got everything you wanted. Can't we at least be civil for the kids?" I stopped, looked at this man I'd once loved more than life itself, and felt absolutely nothing. "We'll be civil at handoffs and school events. But David, We're not friends. We're not co-parents who grab coffee to discuss the kids. You're someone who has limited supervised access to my children until you prove you can be trusted. That's all you are to me now." The transformation began slowly, like watching the sun rise after the longest night of your life. Those first weeks after the court ruling, I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, my body still trained to listen for David's car in the driveway. But instead of anxiety, I felt something unexpected. Peace. The kind of peace that comes from no longer living with secrets and lies, no longer questioning your own instincts, no longer pretending everything is fine when your world is crumbling. I started the nurse practitioner program I'd put off for 3 years because David said the timing wasn't right, that the kids needed me home more. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I'd been sacrificing my career advancement for our family, he'd been building a secret life with another woman. The program was challenging, requiring long hours of study after full shifts at the hospital, but I attacked it with a fervor that surprised even me. This was mine, something he couldn't take away or taint with his betrayal. The kids struggled initially, especially Emma. She'd always been Daddy's girl, and his absence hit her hard. "Why doesn't Daddy live here anymore?" became a nightly question that broke my heart. I'd crafted an age-appropriate explanation about how sometimes adults realize they want different things, that it had nothing to do with how much we both loved her and Luke. The child psychologist Rachel recommended helped tremendously, giving them a safe space to process their confusion and anger. Luke's reaction was different, quieter, but somehow more profound. At 8, he understood more than I'd hoped. "Dad lied, didn't he?" he asked one Saturday morning over pancakes. When I asked what made him think that, he said, "He promised we'd go camping for my birthday, but he forgot. He forgets all his promises now." The maturity in his observation made me simultaneously proud and heartbroken. No child should have to learn so young that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you most. My promotion to head nurse of the pediatric intensive care unit came 6 months after the divorce was finalized. My supervisor, Janet, called me into her office with tears in her eyes. "Camille, you've shown more strength and professionalism through your personal crisis than most people show on their best days. You've earned this." The salary increase meant I could stop worrying about every grocery bill, could sign Emma up for the art classes she'd been wanting, could let Luke join the traveling soccer team without David's financial support. The house felt different with just the 3 of us, but different in a good way. I painted the master bedroom a soft blue, replaced the furniture David and I had chosen together, made it truly mine for the first time. Emma helped me plant a garden in the backyard, something David had always said was too much work. We grew tomatoes and sunflowers, spending evening hours watering and weeding, talking about everything and nothing. Luke built a treehouse with my father's help, creating a sanctuary where he could retreat when the world felt too complicated. The support group started accidentally. I'd mentioned my story to another nurse going through a divorce, and she asked if we could have coffee. Then she brought her sister. Her sister brought a neighbor. Within 2 months, 20 women were meeting every Wednesday night in the community room at the library. We called ourselves the Phoenix Group, rising from the ashes of our former lives. Some had been cheated on, others abused, some simply abandoned, but all of us were rebuilding. Leading the Phoenix Group taught me that my story wasn't unique, but that didn't make it less valid. Every woman's pain was real, every betrayal a death of sorts. We shared lawyers' names and therapist recommendations, babysitted for each other during court dates, celebrated small victories like first dates and new jobs. When Margaret's ex-husband violated his restraining order, 15 of us showed up at her court hearing. When Sandra got her real estate license after her husband said she was too stupid for a career, we were her first clients. I started writing a blog called After the Aftermath, about surviving betrayal and rebuilding. The first post about finding the earring got 50,000 views in a week. Women from around the world shared their own stories in the comments, creating a virtual support network. Publishers reached out about book deals, but I wasn't ready for that yet. For now, the blog was enough a way to process my journey and help others process theirs. Dating wasn't even on my radar until James literally ran into me at Home Depot. I was struggling with a sheet of plywood for Luke's treehouse when this tall bearded man in worn jeans and a flannel shirt appeared. "Let me help you with that," he said, and something about the way he asked genuine without being condescending made me accept. He was a carpenter, recently divorced himself, understood the complexity of introducing someone new to wounded children. Our first coffee wasn't even a date, just two single parents comparing battle scars while our kids played at the park. James's daughter Lily was Emma's age, quiet and artistic like her. His son Marcus was a year older than Luke, but equally soccer-obsessed. Watching them play together felt natural, unforced. "I'm not looking for anything serious," I told him that day. "Neither am I," he replied, then smiled. "But maybe we could be not serious together." 6 months later, James was teaching Luke advanced woodworking skills in our garage, while I helped Lily with her math homework. We weren't the Brady Bunch, weren't trying to be. We were two damaged families who'd found comfort in each other's company. James never pushed, never assumed, always respected the boundaries I'd built. When Emma had a panic attack about him staying for dinner, worried it meant I was replacing her dad, James quietly excused himself and didn't take it personally. That's when I knew he was different. My mother, who'd initially blamed herself for not seeing through David's facade, became my fiercest advocate. "I was so blinded by his charm," she told me one night. "I pushed you to forgive his late nights, to be understanding about his work stress. I should have seen what was happening." Her guilt was misplaced but understandable. David had fooled all of us with his perfect husband act. Now she showed up every Sunday with groceries and stayed for dinner, rebuilding our family traditions without him. David's parents remained true to their word, staying actively involved in the kids' lives while respecting my boundaries. Robert Sr. picked them up every other Saturday for breakfast, and a movie never mentioning David unless the kids brought him up first. Patricia sent cards for every holiday, checks for birthdays, and care packages during finals week when she knew I'd be stressed. They'd essentially divorced David themselves, disgusted by his behavior and determined not to lose their grandchildren because of it. The blog evolved into something bigger than I'd imagined. Women started organizing local Phoenix groups in their cities, using my framework as a guide. A tech-savvy member created an app where women could connect safely, share resources, and find support. Corporate sponsors offered funding. Suddenly, I was being invited to speak at women's conferences, sharing my story on stages I'd never imagined standing on. The girl who'd been told she'd let herself go was now inspiring thousands to reclaim their lives. Professionally, I thrived in ways I'd never thought possible. The nurse practitioner program led to a specialization in pediatric trauma, helping children process their own family disruptions. My personal experience gave me empathy and insight that textbooks couldn't teach. Families requested me specifically, knowing I understood that healing wasn't linear, that some wounds never fully closed, but you could learn to live with the scars. The financial recovery took time, but was ultimately complete. The forensic accountant helped me rebuild our assets, invest wisely, and ensure the kids' college funds were not just restored but growing. I learned to manage money properly, something I'd lazily left to David before. Now I understood every investment, every account, every penny that came in and went out. Financial independence became as important to me as emotional independence. A year and a half after the divorce, I ran into Monica at Whole Foods. She was alone, pushing a cart with a toddler in the seat. The child had David's eyes but Monica's auburn hair. She saw me and froze, clearly debating whether to abandon her groceries and flee. Instead, I walked over. "Hi, Monica." She burst into tears right there by the organic bananas. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I destroyed everything, and for what? He doesn't even see his son. Doesn't pay child support. I was so stupid." I felt no satisfaction in her misery, only a weird sense of kinship. We were both women David had lied to, manipulated, abandoned. "You were 24 and in love," I told her. "He was 40 and knew exactly what he was doing. Don't carry guilt that belongs to him." She looked at me with such surprise and gratitude that I actually hugged her, this woman who'd been sleeping with my husband. Later, Rachel said I was insane, but it felt like closing a chapter with grace instead of bitterness. David's fall from grace was complete and spectacular. After losing his real estate license, he'd bounced between sales jobs, unable to maintain the lifestyle he'd grown accustomed to. The last I heard from his father, David, was working at a car rental agency at the airport, living in a studio apartment in Aurora. He'd tried to reduce his child support payments, claiming financial hardship, but the judge reminded him that his financial obligations to his children weren't negotiable, based on his poor life choices. He showed up for his supervised visits, initially awkward hours at a family center, where a social worker observed his interactions with Emma and Luke. But as the months passed, his visits became less frequent. He missed Emma's spring recital, Luke's championship soccer game, both of their birthdays. Each absence was explained away with work conflicts or illness, but the kids stopped believing the excuses. Eventually, they stopped asking when they'd see him next. The most surprising development was my relationship with Thomas, Monica's ex-husband. We'd stayed in loose contact trauma bonding over our shared betrayal. When he got transferred to Denver for work, we met for coffee. Not romantically, we both had too much baggage for that, but as friends who understood a very specific kind of pain. He became Uncle Tom to my kids, teaching Luke to throw a perfect spiral and attending Emma's art shows. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into. 2 years have passed since I found that earring under my bed. 2 years since my world exploded and reformed into something I never could have imagined. I'm sitting at my kitchen table, the same one where I once spread out evidence of David's betrayal like a roadmap to destruction, but now it's covered with Emma's art projects and Luke's soccer tournament schedules. The morning sun streams through windows I chose the curtains for in a house that's truly mine, filled with laughter that isn't forced or fake. Emma, now 12, has blossomed into a confident young artist who isn't afraid to express her emotions through her paintings. Her latest piece, A Phoenix Rising from Ashes, won first place in the district art competition. She doesn't ask about her father much anymore, though. I keep the door open for questions. When she does mention him, it's matter of fact, without the desperate longing that used to break my heart. My dad lives somewhere else, she tells people. But I have Mom and she's enough. Luke just turned 10 and has become the kind of big brother every mother dreams of. He's protective of Emma, helps around the house without being asked, and has developed this quiet strength that reminds me of my father. His soccer team made it to state championships, and the stands were full of our chosen family. My mother, David's parents, James and his kids, several women from the Phoenix group, and Thomas, who drove 3 hours to be there. David's absence wasn't even noticed anymore, just another empty seat in a world full of people who showed up. The blog has evolved into a book that's being published next month. From Ashes to Phoenix, a guide to rebuilding after betrayal. The dedication reads, "To every woman who's ever found something under her bed that didn't belong there and chose to rise instead of crumble. The advance was enough to pay off the mortgage, ensuring my children will always have a home regardless of what life throws at us. Financial security. I earned myself without depending on anyone else's promises." The Phoenix Group has grown to over 300 members locally with chapters in 15 cities. We've partnered with legal aid societies to provide free consultations for women who can't afford divorce attorneys. We've created emergency funds for those fleeing abusive situations. What started as coffee and tears has become a movement of women refusing to be destroyed by the men who betrayed them. Every success story fuels 10 more women to take that first terrifying step toward freedom. My work at the hospital has taken on new dimensions. As a nurse practitioner specializing in pediatric trauma, I've developed protocols for helping children through family disruptions. The program has been adopted by 3 other hospitals in Colorado. When I see a child struggling with divorce or abandonment, I can honestly tell them it gets better, that they're stronger than they know, that someone else's choices don't define their worth. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to our life's purpose. James and I have been together for a year now, though. Together is a loose term. We maintain separate houses, separate finances, separate lives that intersect beautifully but aren't dependent on each other. He respects my independence, understands my need for control over my own life. We've talked about moving in together eventually, but there's no rush. I've learned that real love is patient, doesn't demand sacrifice of self, doesn't require you to become smaller to fit into someone else's life. The strangest relationship evolution has been with David's parents. They've essentially adopted me as their daughter, written David out of their will, except for a small trust for Emma and Luke, and publicly sided with me in every aspect of the divorce aftermath. Patricia recently told me that losing me as a daughter-in-law was harder than watching her son destroy his life. "You and the children are our family," she said. "David is just someone we used to know who happens to share our DNA." I ran into David 6 months ago at King Soopers. He was buying cheap beer and frozen dinners, looking older, grayer, smaller somehow. He tried to approach me, but I simply turned my cart around and went to a different checkout line. I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not pity. He'd become irrelevant to my life, a character from a story I used to tell, but no longer needed to remember. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference, and I'd finally achieved it. Monica reached out recently through my blog. She's rebuilding too, raising her son alone, going back to school for a counseling degree. She wants to help other women avoid the mistakes she made, recognize the red flags she ignored. I gave her my blessing and even wrote a recommendation letter for her graduate program. Forgiveness isn't about absolving someone of wrongdoing, it's about freeing yourself from the burden of carrying their guilt. The house has been transformed into something unrecognizable from its previous life. Every room holds new memories that have nothing to do with David. The bedroom where I discovered his betrayal is now my sanctuary. Painted in calming blues with art I chose books. He would have mocked a bed that's mine alone until I choose to share it. The kitchen where we had family dinners filled with hidden tensions now hosts Phoenix group potlucks and homework sessions and cookie baking marathons with too many kids and too much flour everywhere. My mother lives with us now, having sold her house to help fund the Phoenix Foundation we're establishing. 3 generations of women under one roof, showing Emma that strength comes in many forms, that independence doesn't mean isolation, that choosing yourself isn't selfish but necessary. She teaches the kids to cook recipes from her mother, while I work late creating continuity across generations that has nothing to do with the men who've come and gone. The financial forensics revealed one last surprise last month: a life insurance policy. David had hidden one that couldn't be touched in the divorce because the kids were beneficiaries. He'd stopped paying the premiums, of course, but I took it over, ensuring that if something happens to him, Emma and Luke will have something from the father who abandoned them. It's not about the money, it's about them knowing they were thought of once upon a time before everything went wrong. I still have that earring, Monica's earring, that started this entire journey. I keep it in a small box in my jewelry drawer, not as a painful reminder, but as a symbol of transformation. Sometimes I hold it up to the light, remembering that morning when I thought my world was ending. I couldn't see then that it was actually beginning, that destruction sometimes clears the path for something infinitely better. The women in my support group often ask how I forgave, how I moved past the anger. The truth is, I didn't forgive David. Some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness, but I forgave myself for not seeing it sooner, for prioritizing his comfort over my growth, for teaching my daughter through my actions that women should accept less than they deserve. That forgiveness was harder and more important than anything I could offer him. Next month marks 3 years since the discovery, and we're planning a celebration. Not of divorce or destruction, but of rebuilding and resilience. The Phoenix Group is hosting a gala to raise money for women starting over. Emma designed the invitations, Luke's soccer team is volunteering as servers, James is building a stage for speakers, and my mother is coordinating the entire event with military precision. David's parents are the primary sponsors, their donation accompanied by a note, "For all the phoenixes rising from ashes they didn't create." People sometimes ask if I regret marrying David, if I wish I could erase those 12 years. The answer is complicated. Without him, I wouldn't have Emma and Luke, wouldn't have discovered my own strength, wouldn't be helping hundreds of women rebuild their lives. The marriage was a chapter, not the whole book. He was a supporting character who tried to steal the narrative, but this story was always mine to write. The truth about betrayal is that it's not really about the betrayer at all. It's about what you do with the pieces they leave behind. You can spend years trying to glue them back together, creating a fragile replica of what was, or you can build something entirely new from the shards, something stronger and more beautiful, because it was forged in fire and chosen deliberately. I chose to build new, and that choice made all the difference. That little earring under my bed didn't destroy my life. It revealed that the life I was living wasn't really mine at all. It was a performance, a carefully constructed facade that required me to be smaller, quieter, less than I actually was. The earring was just the crack that brought the whole structure down, and in that destruction, I found freedom I didn't even know I was missing. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing, not because betrayal is good, but because surviving it shows you exactly how powerful you really are. Looking at my life now, surrounded by chosen family, pursuing a career I'm passionate about, raising children who see their mother as a warrior instead of a victim, I can honestly say I'm grateful. Not to David, never to him, but to that version of myself who found an earring and chose to look deeper instead of looking away. She could have pretended not to see, could have accepted the lies to preserve the peace, but she didn't. She chose truth over comfort, and that choice led to this life, this real, authentic, sometimes messy, but always honest life. The sunrise is painting the mountains pink outside my kitchen window. The same mountains I've watched every morning for years, but they look different now. Everything looks different when you're seeing it through your own eyes, instead of through the filter of someone else's deception. Emma's starting to wake up. I can hear her moving around upstairs. Luke will be next, stomping down for breakfast. James is texting about weekend plans. My mother is already up. I can smell coffee brewing. This is my life, chosen and built deliberately, and it's more beautiful than anything I could have imagined when I was trying to save a marriage that was already dead. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in my story, if you found your own earring under your own bed, know this. The pain you're feeling is real and valid, but it's not permanent. The person who betrayed you doesn't get to define your worth or determine your future. You have more strength than you know, more resilience than you can imagine, and more support than you can see right now. The path forward isn't easy, but it's yours to walk, and on the other side of this darkness is a light that belongs entirely to you. Trust yourself. Choose yourself. And when you're ready, rise. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, please share this video with them. Like and subscribe if you want to hear more real stories of triumph over betrayal. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you rebuilt after betrayal? What gave you strength when you thought you had none left? Let's create a community of phoenixes, all of us rising together from ashes we didn't choose but refused to let bury us. Remember, you're stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and worthy of a love that doesn't require you to become less to receive it. Until next time, keep rising.